I borrowed my mother's phone and accidentally opened a hidden folder. Inside were family vacation photos I had never seen, my sister's birthday trips with my parents. I wasn't there. The next day, I sent them a message. Don't contact me again. What happened next left me speechless. As the morning sun illuminated Chicago skyscrapers, Emily Carter was already at her desk. She was in her 7th year as a senior designer at the advertising agency Creative Impulse. The light streaming through the window illuminated the photo frame neatly arranged on her desk. It contained only her graduation photo. Emily had meticulously tied her hair in a ponytail and was dressed in a simple yet sophisticated navy blouse and gray pantsuit. Colleagues often called her a perfectionist, sometimes keeping their distance, but everyone acknowledged the quality of her work. Taking a deep breath, she sipped her coffee and checked her emails. A message from her mother was flashing in the corner of the screen. After a moment's hesitation, Emily decided to open it. Emily, I haven't received your response about your father's birthday party. It's next Sunday. Sophie has even taken special time off work. Emily sighed as she stared at the screen. Her mother, Linda, had worked as an English teacher at Oak Park High School in suburban Chicago for 25 years. She was adored by her students and respected by her colleagues. At home, she always portrayed the image of a perfect mother, showing particularly doting affection for her younger daughter, Sophie. I'll reply later, Emily muttered, leaving the email marked as unread. She didn't want to go to her father's birthday party. Her father, Henry, had worked as a sales manager at the local real estate company, Carter Realty, for over 20 years. He was sociable, pleasant, and well regarded by clients. However, at home, he always deferred to her mother's opinions and rarely intervened in conflicts between the daughters. Emily often described her relationship with her father as superficial respect. He was proud of her grades and professional successes, but never truly tried to understand her. Instead, Henry's attention was always directed toward her sister, Sophie. Sophie, just thinking of that name, stirred complex emotions in Emily. Sophie worked in the personal banking division of the local First National Bank, and rumors of her promotion to assistant branch manager had been circulating recently. With long blonde hair and blue eyes, Sophie had been the cheerleading captain in school and still maintained an active social life, going out to parties with friends on weekends. "Mother's favorite," Emily whispered quietly. It wasn't mere jealousy, but a conclusion drawn from years of observation. At family gatherings, her mother would be excited, talking about Sophie, while showing only formal interest in Emily's achievements. Her phone on the desk vibrated. The screen displayed grandfather. Emily's expression softened. It was a call from her maternal grandfather, James, a former judge and a wealthy man. He might be the only family member Emily could truly open up to. "Good morning," Emily answered the phone with a cheerful voice. "Good morning, Emily. How are you doing?" James's warm voice resonated. "I'm fine, just busy." "How are you doing?" "Still not letting the young ones beat me," James answered with a laugh. "About Henry's birthday party, you're coming, aren't you?" Emily hesitated for a moment. "I haven't decided yet. Work is keeping me busy." Her grandfather sighed deeply on the other end. "I understand, Emily. I know how difficult family gatherings can be for you. But would you come for my sake? I'm getting old. There aren't many opportunities for the whole family to gather." Emily closed her eyes and pressed her forehead with her hand. She couldn't refuse her grandfather's words. "All right, grandfather. I'll come. I'm relieved to hear that. Also, I saw the article about your project last month. It was excellent. Your talent is genuine." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes at his words. After hanging up, Emily gazed out the window, deep in thought. Since childhood, she had felt like the odd one out in her family. Serious and sincere, her family often described her as boring and inflexible. Her relationships with her family, especially those outside her grandfather, seemed to grow more distant with each passing year. She had been invited to family gatherings less frequently in recent years. Even for Christmas and Thanksgiving, she was increasingly told, Emily must be busy. It was partly true, but she sometimes deliberately scheduled appointments, anticipating the rejection. Emily turned her chair back to face her computer screen. She opened her calendar and checked next Sunday. It was blank. Slowly, she typed Dad's birthday party and saved it. I wonder what excuses I'll hear this time, she muttered as she returned to work. Deep down, she yearned for family bonds, while constantly fearing rejection. All she wanted was to be truly accepted as a member of the family. On Saturday afternoon, Emily stood on the porch of her mother's house, the day before her father's birthday party. She had come to print reference materials for a new design project. As her own printer had broken down and the deadline was approaching, Emily, you came? Linda opened the door and gave her a formal hug. Perfect timing. Sophie just went out to buy decorations for the party, and I've just ordered the cake. Thank you, Emily responded quietly. May I use the printer? Yes, of course. Use it in the study. By the way, have you already prepared your father's present? Emily gave a small smile. Yes, I found the vintage watch he's been wanting. Oh, that's nice, Linda said, but her voice lacked enthusiasm. Sophie bought a golf set. Your father will be thrilled. Emily nodded silently and headed upstairs to the study, feeling her mother's words pierce her heart, even as she tried not to show any emotion. Entering the study and turning on the computer, a password screen appeared. Emily sighed. Mom, can you tell me the password? She called downstairs. Oh, I forgot I changed it last week. Linda came upstairs. My smartphone will be quicker. Your materials came by email, right? Linda unlocked her iPhone and handed it to Emily. Here, use this. I need to make a final confirmation call about the cake. I'll be back in about 30 minutes, okay? Thanks. When Linda left the room, Emily let out a relieved sigh. She opened the email app on her mother's smartphone and began searching for the materials she had sent herself. She downloaded the attachment and sent it to the printer. As the printer started working, Emily found herself at loose ends. Unconsciously, she returned to the home screen of her mother's phone and began scrolling through the apps. Her attention was caught by a folder labeled Private Albums. Private albums? Emily whispered. Driven by curiosity, she tapped on the folder. The screen displayed dozens of photo albums with titles like Sophie's Birthday Florida Trip 2023, Christmas Dinner, Family Weekend. Emily frowned. She had never heard about these events. Strange, she tapped on the album titled Sophie's Birthday. Photos appeared one after another. Her sister, Sophie, sitting, smiling in front of a birthday cake, surrounded by their parents, friends, and relatives. Emily gasped. This was from 3 months ago. She hadn't been invited. What is this? Her hands began to shake. Next, she opened Florida Trip 2023. There were photos of her parents and Sophie enjoying themselves on a beach in Miami. Checking the date, it was the same week Emily had been told they can't go on a family trip because of an important presentation. They lied to me. Emily's voice trembled. Then, Christmas dinner. This was last Christmas, when Emily had been told there are no special family plans and spent the day alone in her apartment. The photos showed the family around a lavish dinner table. Even grandfather James was there. Emily's heart began to race. She opened Family Weekend and saw more family photos without her in them. She went through all the albums in the folder one by one. In none of the photos was she present. Why? Tears fell from her eyes. She didn't even notice that the printer had stopped. At that moment, she heard the door opening downstairs. Emily, did you finish printing the materials? Linda's voice called out. Emily quickly restored the phone to its original state and wiped her tears. However, she couldn't wipe away the emptiness and pain spreading inside her chest. Yes, I did, she answered with a trembling voice. When Linda returned to the study, Emily had already packed her materials into her bag and was standing. You're leaving already? Linda asked, somewhat surprised. Yes, I still have things to do. Emily couldn't meet her mother's eyes. I see. You're coming to the party tomorrow, right? Emily nodded without saying anything. She hurried down the stairs and toward the front door. Emily, are you okay? Did something happen? Linda followed after her. Nothing. See you tomorrow, Emily answered briefly, opening the door and stepping outside. Once in her car, she rested her forehead against the steering wheel and cried quietly. The unease she had felt for years now stood clearly before her in a definite form. She had been excluded from her family, and deliberately so. Back at her apartment, Emily couldn't sleep all night. She dug into past memories, recalling her family's words and actions. Emily is busy. Emily wouldn't be interested. Don't tell Emily. She'll be hurt. These words now resonated with new meaning. By the time the morning sun streamed through her window, Emily had made a decision. She picked up her cell phone and sent the same message to all family members, "Don't contact me anymore." Then she blocked them all: phone, social media, all means of contact. It was a strange feeling, a mixture of liberation and sadness. Chicago spring was changing gradually, just like Emily's state of mind. 3 months after cutting ties with her family, she had maintained her isolation and immersed herself in work. Her reputation at Creative Impulse had risen even more than before, having won an award last month for a campaign for a major beverage company. Sipping her coffee while looking at the cityscape visible from her office window, Emily felt the void in her heart still aching, but her daily life moved forward. Want to come to a new yoga class with me? Her colleague Rachel stopped by her desk. I heard the instructor is really good this weekend. Emily smiled. Rachel was a colleague she had become particularly close to since cutting ties with her family. Sounds good. I'd like to try it. Her cell phone vibrated. It was a call from an unknown number. Normally, she would ignore it, but for some reason, she felt compelled to answer. Hello, Emily. It's me. Emily's heart jumped at her grandfather James's voice. Grandfather, I'm sorry. I'm calling from a new number. I heard you blocked everyone in the family. James's voice was calm but contained a hint of sadness. Emily stood up and headed to the conference room. I didn't mean to block you too, but no need to explain. I understand, James said, but there's something I need to talk to you about. Could you come to my house this evening? Emily hesitated. What is it about? I want to talk in person. This isn't a conversation for the phone. Her grandfather's voice had an unusual urgency. All right, she finally agreed. I'll come at 6. After hanging up, Emily stood by the window, looking down at the city of Chicago. The prospect of reuniting with her grandfather brought both expectation and anxiety to her heart. James Morrison's mansion was located in an upscale residential area in northern Chicago. Passing through the stone gates, a well-maintained garden spread out. When Emily rang the doorbell, the butler, Harold, greeted her. Emily was led through the spacious hallway to her grandfather's study. James was sitting in a leather chair in front of the fireplace. His appearance was still dignified, but he seemed a bit thinner than before. Emily, I'm glad you came. James stood up and embraced his granddaughter. Grandfather, Emily relaxed a little in his arms. I'm glad to see you're well. Sit down, James pointed to another chair in front of the fireplace. First, I want to say that I don't blame you for your decision. Emily nodded silently. I know about the photos, James said quietly. Linda told me that you found them. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. Why, grandfather? Why am I the only one who was excluded? James finished her sentence. That's what I want to talk to you about today. Grandfather stood up and took an old leather-bound album from the bookshelf. This is the family history I've recorded over the years. Emily took the album from her grandfather and opened it. It contained family photos she had never seen before. Pictures of her mother, Linda, when she was young, Christmas scenes with her grandparents, and then, this is, Emily gasped. Yes, your mother and her sister, your Aunt Elizabeth, James said gravely. Elizabeth died 30 years ago in a car accident. Emily continued turning the pages. Aunt Elizabeth looked very similar to her mother Linda, but her eyes seemed gentler and more open. But how does this relate to our family's problems? James let out a deep sigh. Linda and Elizabeth were always competitive. Elizabeth was bright, sociable, and loved by everyone. Linda, on the other hand, he searched for words, was more introverted and jealous. After Elizabeth's death, Linda changed. The darker aspects of her personality became stronger. Still, "Why am I you resemble Elizabeth, Emily?" James said quietly. "Not just in appearance, but in character too, your honesty, your kindness. For your mother, perhaps that brings back painful memories." Emily was speechless. She stared at her aunt's photos. "However, that's no excuse." James's voice suddenly grew stronger. "What Linda, Sophie, and Henry did to you is inexcusable. They lied to me," Emily said quietly, "telling me there were no family gatherings when in fact—" "Yes, and they lied to me too," James said, unable to contain his anger. "Emily is too busy to come. Emily said she's not interested." I believed them. I was foolish. Tears fell from Emily's eyes. "You didn't know. If I had known, I would never have allowed it," James said resolutely. "Sophie came to me last month, crying, and told me the truth, probably out of guilt." Emily looked up in surprise. "Sophie?" "Yes, your estrangement seems to have shocked her. She has always done what her mother told her, but this time, her conscience must have troubled her." James stood up and walked to his desk. "Emily, I've made a decision. Next Saturday, I'm holding a special dinner at this house. I'm inviting the entire family." "What?" "But I want you to come." James looked at Emily with serious eyes. "This is also for your vindication, and I have something to tell everyone, the whole family." Emily looked at her grandfather with a confused expression. "Grandfather, what are you?" "That's a surprise for the day." James smiled slightly. "I'm proud of you, Emily, of your strength and sincerity, and now it's time to demonstrate that to the entire family." Emily took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. She didn't feel ready to face her family again. However, seeing her grandfather's determined gaze, she nodded weakly. "All right, grandfather, I'll come." "Good decision," James said with satisfaction. "I'll send formal invitations, but the dress code is formal. I want to make it an occasion worthy of celebrating the family reunion." As she was leaving, Emily turned at the door and asked her grandfather, "Grandfather, are you sure about this?" "You seem to be plotting something." James smiled. "Don't worry. It's just that the time has come for the truth to be revealed." On Saturday evening, Emily arrived at her grandfather's mansion, dressed in a black cocktail dress, feeling a tightness in her stomach from nervousness. She approached the front door. Inside, her family had already gathered: Father Henry, Mother Linda, and Sister Sophie. Their expressions varied. Linda was clearly anxious, Henry confused, and Sophie looked at Emily with eyes full of guilt. "Emily," Henry approached. "It's been a while." "Yes, it has," Emily answered briefly. An awkward silence ensued. At that moment, James entered the room. He was wearing a black tuxedo and appeared unusually dignified. "Everyone, please be seated," James announced. "Tonight is a special dinner." As everyone sat around the dining table, James picked up his glass. "Before making a toast, there's something I want to tell everyone." He stood up and said in a solemn voice, "For many years I have cherished the honor of this family. I have valued honesty and dignity." He looked at Emily. "And tonight, I want to reaffirm those values." James looked around the table: Linda, Henry, Sophie. His voice sounded cold. "I know what you have done to Emily, excluding her from the family, lying, hurting her." Linda's face changed color. "Dad, that's—" "Be quiet," James's voice was stern. "I don't want to hear excuses. These are not the values I taught you." He walked over to Emily. "Emily Carter is the most honest, hardworking, and valuable person in this family. Her success is all the result of her own efforts." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. James placed his hand on her shoulder. "And tonight I have made a decision," he said, facing the table. I designate Emily as the heir to my fortune and business. A wave of shock ran through the room. Linda gasped. Henry half rose from his chair. Sophie's face turned pale. "Dad, what do you mean?" Linda asked in a trembling voice. "It's clear," James answered calmly. "After my death, the Morrison family fortune and management rights to the real estate business will transfer to Emily. This is my final decision, and the legal procedures are already complete." Emily was stunned. She looked up at her grandfather, overwhelmed by his determined expression. "Grandfather, this is not a punishment," James said, addressing the entire family. "This is a decision to give the right responsibility to the right person." James raised his glass. "To Emily Carter, my granddaughter and the future of the Morrison family." With trembling hands, Emily raised her own glass. In the imposing conference room of Morrison Real Estate, Emily was reviewing newly arrived documents. A week after her grandfather's dinner, she had officially been appointed as a director of the company. Holding a business card with the company logo, it still didn't feel real. The door was knocked, and her grandfather James entered. "Getting adjusted?" he asked with a smile. "Little by little," Emily answered honestly. "I have a lot to learn about the real estate industry." "I believe in your sharp insight and learning ability." James sat in the chair opposite her. "Besides, you already have proven management sense in the advertising industry. You'll bring a new perspective to this company." Emily nodded and shifted her gaze to the window. The downtown skyscrapers were visible. "What about father and my sister?" James's expression clouded. "On the surface, they're accepting your appointment. Henry continues to work in the sales department as before, and Sophie started working as a financial assistant last week. Is it really okay?" Emily couldn't hide her concern. "They probably need time to face the truth," Grandfather said quietly. "Now then, from today, I'm giving you access to all accounting records and transaction histories to understand the company's reality. It's important to know its past." From that day on, Emily began dividing her time between her job at the advertising agency and managing Morrison Company. Her attention to detail and analytical skills quickly began to show results. She scrutinized the accounting records for the past 5 years and investigated transaction patterns. 3 weeks later, at night, Emily remained at the company office, concentrating on reading materials. She frowned as she checked the same numbers repeatedly. "Strange," she muttered. The monitor displayed the company's accounting system. She investigated deeper, cross-referencing bank account statements, deposit and withdrawal records, and client transaction histories. Finally, she discovered a pattern of irregularities. Emily took notes with trembling hands and printed out the data. Over the past 3 years, funds had been regularly withdrawn from the company and transferred to multiple accounts that were difficult to trace. Further investigation revealed that these accounts were related to personal investments by her father, Henry, and sister, Sophie. Unbelievable. Emily gathered the materials and stuffed them into her bag. She needed to report to her grandfather immediately. The next morning, in James's home study, Emily explained her discovery. "Do you have proof?" James asked with a stern expression. "Yes, all the evidence is here." Emily spread out the files. "Father and my sister have diverted about $2 million from the company over the past 3 years, overcharging clients, fictitious expenses, fake transaction records. I have evidence for everything." James was silent for a long time. Anger and disappointment flickered in his eyes. "I was blind," he finally said. "My own daughter and granddaughter, such betrayal." "What will you?" Emily asked quietly. James stood up and walked to the window. "I considered legal action, but that would expose the family's shame." He turned around. "Instead, I'll hold another family meeting. This time, I'll call all relatives, all of them." "All of them?" Emily asked in surprise. "Yes, all members of the Morrison and Carter families, including cousins, about 30 people." James's voice was filled with determination. "For the honor and future of the family, all truths should be revealed." A week later, James's mansion was bustling with relatives for the first time in a while. Emily sat next to her grandfather, nervous but with a straight back. She looked at her father and sister sitting on the opposite side of the room. They were clearly anxious. After dinner, James stood up and clinked his glass. "Dear family members, I've gathered you all today at this important crossroads for the Morrison family," he said solemnly. "My life is drawing to a close. In the time I have left, I want to secure the future of this family." He beckoned to Emily. She stood up and stood beside her grandfather. "I formally announce Emily Carter as the next president of Morrison Real Estate," James declared. A murmur arose in the room. "However, before that, there's something I want everyone to know." James slowly looked around the room. "Recent investigations have revealed that company funds were misappropriated." The room suddenly fell silent. "Henry, Sophie, stand up," James's voice was stern. Emily's father and sister stood up, trembling. "You have betrayed the trust of the Morrison family." James held up a file. "Here is the evidence that you diverted company funds for private use and falsified records." "Wait, that's a misunderstanding." Henry desperately raised his voice. "You'll have an opportunity to explain," James said calmly. "But the evidence is clear." Linda stared at her husband and daughter, her face pale. "Is this true?" Her voice trembled. Sophie had tears in her eyes and couldn't speak. Henry also fell silent. "This is my judgment," James declared. "Henry and Sophie are banished from Morrison Company as of today. Emily will take full authority over the company." The room buzzed. Relatives looked at each other with expressions of surprise and shock. Emily stood quietly, savoring the irony of fate. The family that had excluded her would now be excluded by her. But there was no joy in her heart, only a quiet conviction that justice was being served. The summer sun in Chicago reflected off the glass windows of Morrison Real Estate's new office building as preparations for the first anniversary celebration continued. Emily stood by the window, gazing at the city view. Over the past year, her life had changed in unimaginable ways. "Everything is ready, President," her secretary, Jennifer, smiled as she entered the room. Emily turned around and returned a grateful smile. "Thank you." "Has grandfather arrived?" "Yes, he's waiting in the lobby." "Almost everyone else has gathered too." Emily took a deep breath and relaxed her shoulders. "Let's go then." As she rode the elevator, she reflected on the past year. After her father and sister's fraud was exposed, she courageously resigned from creative impulse and devoted all her energy to rebuilding Morrison Company. Initially, she struggled to regain the industry's trust, but her integrity and innovative approach gradually won recognition. Currently, Morrison Company had achieved 20% growth compared to the previous year and was once again a respected company in the real estate industry. Arriving at the lobby, James was standing straight despite holding a cane. Next to him was Emily's mother, Linda. "Emily," her mother called out, looking a bit tense. "Mom, thank you for coming," Emily responded quietly. Repairing the relationship with Linda was slow and not easy. After deciding to separate from Henry, Linda had attempted to contact her daughter and apologized multiple times. Emily had initially kept her distance, but over time began to open her heart. "You've raised a wonderful company," James said, embracing his granddaughter's shoulders. "I'm proud. It's all thanks to you, grandfather," Emily smiled. At the venue, clients and employees had gathered to celebrate Emily's achievements. Models and drawings of new projects were displayed on the walls, symbolizing Morrison Company's bright future. When it was time for the congratulatory speech, James took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for gathering today. 1 year ago, I made a major decision regarding the future of this company, and now I am confident that decision was correct." He extended his hand to Emily. As she stepped onto the stage, applause erupted. Later in the party, as Emily was taking a break in a quiet corner, her mother approached. "I heard from Sophie," Linda said quietly. "She's still unable to recover from the broken engagement." Emily nodded silently. Her sister's fiancé's family had broken off the engagement immediately after the fraud was exposed. What did you tell her? The truth, Linda answered. That actions have consequences. Quiet understanding flowed between them. What about Dad? Emily asked. I heard he got a job at a small real estate company in another state. Linda shrugged. We won't be getting back together, I think. Emily gazed out the window. The sunset was beginning to spread across the sky. The hatred and anger were gradually fading, and instead a quiet acceptance and determination to move forward filled her heart. A new beginning, she said quietly. Yes, Linda agreed. For all of us. Emily gave her mother a small smile. The future was still uncertain, but she was confident in the path she was walking. No hidden truth would ever shake her again.